I eyed the rainbow of herbal teas my mother-in-law had lined up in front of me and wrinkled my nose. They had forced so many down my throat that even the sight made my stomach churn. The steam was still rising when my husband, a boss, slid the tray closer and said, "Drink it before it gets cold." I whimpered, "I can't. I'm going to be sick." Before a boss could say a word, my mother-in-law plopped a lump of rock candy into the tea. "Think of your poor husband for once, not just yourself. What kind of attitude is this?" My ears were numb from hearing the same lines. I knew the next words would be to call me barren, so I took the glass and knocked it back in one go. It hadn't even cleared my throat before I bolted to the toilet. With every gag, I cursed my luck. My whole life had become about a baby. A boss kept saying, "There's this guy my age. His wife just had their second." My mother-in-law was no better. She held up other daughters-in-law as examples and piled the weight of the world on me. I had 4 brothers-in-law, and all 4 were churning out babies as if it were a competition. My mother-in-law seemed determined not to die before seeing a child from a boss. So with her bad back and aching knees, she crisscrossed the city every day, east to west, north to south. At any herb shop she saw, she would buy whatever they had, boil it, and force it down my throat. At some point, I broke. I was sick of pills, sick of doctors, sick of herbs. The question, "Why don't you have a child?" made me nauseous. My nerves unraveled. I snapped at nothing. I screamed at the air. At first, a boss tried to calm me, to ease me into the mold he wanted. But when he realized I would not be a puppet for him and his mother, when I canceled their appointments and refused to trail after this faith healer and that herbalist, he raised his hand against me. Our life was on the edge of a cliff. I could see our marriage dying and could do nothing. A boss began to talk about a second wife. Of course, it was my mother-in-law whispering in his ear. Maybe she feared her son would be left without an heir. If my poor old parents hadn't been depending on my brother and his wife, I would have divorced and gone back to eat dry bread with my own family. But I had nowhere to go. I grew terrified another woman would walk into that home. The thought stole my sleep and my appetite. Mala, my old neighbor and confidant, whose life was as hard as mine, said, "Why don't you adopt from the orphanage? A child doesn't have to be your own blood." I had never once thought of adoption. I knew a boss would never accept what he saw as an insult. But Mala kept at me until I found the courage. One night, over dinner, after 100 silent prayers, I said to a boss, "What if we bring home a child from the orphanage?" He gave me a hard stare, downed his doog, and muttered, "Stop talking nonsense." Then he left the table. I didn't back off. I became relentless. I showed him films. I talked about psychology. I spoke of the blessings in this world and the next. I pressed every soft spot he had, until one day he said, "What about my mother?" We told no one. We went together to see the children. The process was long. They did not hand over a child that easily. But from the moment I saw Hannah, I could not wait to bring her home. She was a 4-year-old girl. A boss himself picked her from all the others. Her hair shone, and her eyes were the color of the sea. When a boss whispered, "What kind of fools would abandon a child like this?" I knew Hannah had stolen his heart. At last, our home lit up. At first, Hannah was restless, but we bought her so many little things that she never got bored. Every time I saw Abbas playing with her so patiently, my heart melted. So this is what having a child feels like, I told myself. A week later, we took Hannah to my father-in-law's house. They were stunned. For a mother-in-law who expected Abbas to consult her for even a glass of water, a secret like this was impossible to swallow. She thought we were joking. When she realized it was real, she stared into Hannah's eyes and said, "Why bring home this orphan? We're not here to raise someone else's child." Then she showered me with insults. "If you had what it takes to bear a child, at least you wouldn't make us a laughingstock." Abbas said nothing. I, whose tears are always close, choked back a sob, and Hannah cried her eyes out in fear. After that, I told Abbas, "Even if God himself comes down, I will not set foot in your father's house again." From then on, he went alone. I devoted my life to Hannah. Soon I loved her as if I had nursed her myself, as if I had carried her 9 months, as if she were my own blood. Abbas was mostly at work. Even from a distance, I could feel my mother-in-law's threats and jabs. Now and then they got to him. Whenever he lost patience with Hannah, I knew he had been in touch with his mother. Soon, Hannah started school. She was sharp. I told her always to call me her real mother. When teachers praised me for such a polite, bright child, my heart swelled. With each passing year, Abbas grew less attached to Hannah. When I grumbled, he said, "Little kids are sweet." But I knew his mother was still turning him against us. Years passed. Hannah chose her field. She excelled. Half the boys among those same relatives who once looked at her with suspicion were now lining up to propose. But neither I nor Abbas nor Hannah herself would let her marry that young. Hannah said she wanted to be a doctor. Maybe one day she would emigrate. Every time I heard that word, I trembled. I kissed her face and whispered, "Stay, my love. What's wrong with here? Why not serve your own country?" I told myself she would grow out of it. I tried to stop worrying. Then, what I had waited for years happened when I least expected it. I came home with a positive pregnancy test. I did not know whether to laugh or cry. I was in shock. Abbas, unlike me, handed out sweets to the whole family. On the heels of that news, my mother-in-law walked back into our lives. Hannah was happier than Abbas. She said she had always wanted a sister or brother. She had even chosen a name. At night, she lay beside me, kissed my belly, and vowed to raise the baby as studious as she was. Neither of us had a clue what Abbas was plotting. I was 5 months along. The baby was a girl. Hannah said she wanted to name her Mana. She would not let me lift a finger. She decorated the room with such joy. Then Abbas, out of nowhere, said Hannah had to go back to the orphanage. We froze. He said now that we were having our own child, Hannah's place with us made no sense. He said everything he had spent on her was fine and she could visit once a month, but he would not let his child grow up beside someone else's child. My blood pressure crashed. I was hospitalized. I swore if he said it again, I would end the pregnancy. I said that nothing and no one was more precious to me than Hannah. If she was gone, I was gone. My mother-in-law fanned the flames. Seeing Hannah's tearful eyes, I cursed that woman for life and begged God to deal with her and to cure my gullible husband. Abbas would not budge.
He scolded Hana. He hit her. Once, when I threw myself between them, he kicked me by mistake. I nearly died, but the baby did not even whimper. I fought with all I had, but Hana could not stay, because Abbas would not allow it. I filed a complaint. It did nothing. He took my child from me. I was left with a wreck of a life, and a husband I could no longer stand to look at. He said the second house was in her name, and that was enough. Wherever she went, she would be fine. His words made me sick. He knew nothing of attachment, nothing of a mother's heart. I kept asking myself if he had been pretending all those years to love Hana. After 1,000 struggles, I brought Mana into the world, a baby I had wanted to abort again and again. She came anyway. On the day she was born, I cried for Hana. Hana, who no longer wanted to see me. My heart had gone black toward Abbas. I could not bear him in the house. If he spoke, I erupted. He would slip out, afraid I might hurt myself or the baby. I looked at Mana's face and didn't know whether to love her or blame her. She had come at the cost of Hana, yet she was an innocent child. Slowly, the baby I had struggled to love grew and grew. I realized if it weren't for Mana, I would have died of grief. I played with her and cried for Hana. I fed her and cried for Hana. I went many times to see Hana, but she refused to see me. Abbas and I were, in truth, divorced in everything but papers. We slept in separate rooms. I knew he was cheating. I did not care. If I had a roof of my own, I would have left. I didn't. So I burned and stayed silent. At 15, Mana was nothing like Hana. She had no interest in school. She could not focus. Every doctor said it was nothing serious. Then one day, in the middle of a family party, she collapsed. I screamed at Abbas, "You took Hana from me. Do not let me lose this child too. Find a real doctor." But Abbas was so lost in his vices that he would not listen. An acquaintance gave me a doctor's address and told me to take Mana's tests there. I grabbed her and went. The clinic was crowded. Her headache was unbearable. When our turn came, we hurried in. I sat, lifted my head to hand over the results, and froze at the sight of the person in front of me. The world spun. I whispered, "Hana, my Hana." The girl I had poured my youth into now sat before me in a white coat. She had gone pale too. We both fell silent. Mana, who knew nothing, stared at us stunned. I stood and walked to Hana. I was breathless with tears. I tried to hug her. She pushed me away. She was crying too, trying to hide it.
I begged her to look at me, to see the lines on my face, the gray in my hair. I told her about the nights and days I had cried for her. She took the papers and forced me out. At the last second, she asked Mana, "Your name is Mana?" I heard the sound of Hana's heart breaking. I paced the waiting room with no answers for Mana's questions. Then Hana called me back in, this time without Mana. I rushed in, hopeful my words had softened her. Without any preamble, she said, "Your daughter has a brain tumor." That day was hell. My legs gave way. The world went black. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. I had seen my child after years, and I was losing my other child. I burned in the middle of it all. Mana was under Hana's care. She would not take a fee from us, but she ignored my tears. She was trying hard to choose reason over feeling. One day, I dragged Abbas to the clinic and sat him down in front of Hana.
I wanted him to break. I wanted him to choke on regret. I told him, the child you said you did not want is now the one treating the child who carries your blood. Abbas stood there, stunned. He had not imagined Hannah had built a life on her own. In my heart, I showered her with praise, though I did not dare say a word. It has been a little over a year now that Mana has been under Hannah's care. The two of them talk on the phone often. Mana has heard our story from Abbas. She pities both of us. With a broken heart, I watch Hannah fight to keep Mana's spirits up. The same Mana whose room she once decorated with such joy, whose name she had chosen herself. Hannah still will not let me get close. To spare her, I no longer go to the clinic with Mana. Abbas takes her most of the time. When he returns, I see how ashamed he is, how regret burns him, and I confess, a small corner of my heart softens at the sight. I do not know how long Hannah will keep me at a distance. I do not know when my Mana will get better. I do not know when my godless husband will stop cheating and burning our lives. This not knowing, these tests of endurance, are about to snap my bent back, and after years of fighting to stay alive, finally bring me to my knees.